Welcome to Dove and Dragon Radio. I'm your host, M.L.Ruscsak. Our show today is brought to you by the Women's Clothing and Jewelry Boutique, meeting all your feminine needs. I'm brought to you today with our special guest, Jay Marcus. Welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Now, you have a book out, if I'm pulling up stuff right. The Coherence Effect, tapping into the laws of nature that govern health, happiness, and the higher brain functioning. That's a mouthful. So what led you to write this book?
Well, this is the fifth book that I've written on basically stress management, meditation.
Mhm.
And this book ties together meditation with some of the other ancient health principles of what is known as Ayurveda. And they all produce a common effect, which is coherence in the functioning of the brain and the body. And coherence is really the key to staying alive and really the key to life itself. We've had a couple of articles published that are adapted from the book since the book came out a few months ago. And two of the most popular articles, two journals have published an article called What is Life? A Scientific Perspective. And that tells about the importance of coherence in our lives. And coherence is something very specific, and we'll get into that. But it really is the key to keeping us healthy. I can explain that, or if you have a
Well,
question.
what I was going to say for the viewers and listeners at home that don't understand what coherence is, can you please explain that?
Yeah. So in saying that coherence is the key to staying healthy and staying alive, what would be helpful is first to understand from a scientific perspective what happens at death. And there's a famous law of nature, a law of physics, called the Second Law of Thermodynamics, for people who have a science background. That law is said to be the scientific equivalent of the works of Shakespeare. So it's a very important law of nature. And what it says is that anything that is not alive progressively becomes more disorderly over time. Food, for example, that we leave out on the table becomes rotten. Buildings deteriorate. Cars fall apart. Anything that is not a living organism becomes progressively more disorderly. Living organisms, on the other hand, alone have the ability to grow and evolve, at least for a time. And the way living organisms do this is that they all have coherence maintaining and coherence generating internal systems. So, for example, the body, the human body, is actually almost unfathomably coherent or orderly in its functioning. We have an immune system that keeps germs from getting into the body and kills those that enter. We have homeostatic systems that regulate our temperature, regulate the pH level of our fluids and so on. And we produce hundreds of chemicals each day to maintain coherence in life. Melatonin when we need to go to sleep, cortisol in the morning to wake up, pepsin to help us digest our food, other chemicals when we need nutrition that trigger our hunger. So we are these coherence maintaining systems, and that's what keeps us alive. But eventually,
They start breaking down.
Body, becomes disorderly. Even modern medicine, what it's trying to do with pharmaceuticals is bring some order where there's disorder. So maintaining order is the key to life. And fortunately, there are strategies that we can employ that will enhance our ability to maintain coherence. And that is what the book is all about. And because coherence is so important, we really should look for strategies. If we're into natural medicine, meditation, diet, exercise, we need to do all those things because those are the things that really keep us healthy. But
Right.
we need to do them with a focus on which of them create coherence, a measurable coherence in the body. And that will be the key to selecting the right diet, the right meditation, the right exercise programs, the right strategies for sleep. And that's, the crucial thing to health. I wrote the book, co-authored it with a physician, a graduate of Yale Medical School, who's a brilliant physician who has already written a couple of books on Ayurveda, the ancient health science, and also a PhD from UCLA, who is one of the fathers of mind-body medicine. His early research was published in the leading journals, Science and Scientific American, and showed the physiological changes during one particular meditation technique, Transcendental Meditation, and that is the meditation program that we say produces the most coherence in the brain and the body. And that itself is very interesting research.
Now, with your research that you've been doing with these books, did you come across Hertz meditation?
Hertz meditation?
With different sound waves?
Okay, yeah. So I didn't come across that one. There is no literature on that one showing that it produces brainwave coherence. But the hertz is a measure of, the number of oscillations, the number of vibrations in a particular period of time. And there are different vibrational frequencies. It's a frequency of vibration. There are different vibrational frequencies depending on what's going on in the mind and the brain. For example, during sleep, there are what we know as delta brain waves, very slow brain waves. When we're relaxed and yet alert at the same time, which is a very key state to be in to function well, then there are alpha waves of about 8 to 12 hertz. And that means 8 to 12 vibrations per second. Then there are faster waves when we're concentrating, beta and gamma and so on. But what the research has shown is that what's most important is first that the brain waves in different areas of the brain are coherent. And what that means, it means something very specific. It means that the brain waves in different areas are basically of the same frequency, the same hertz, at the same time. The neurons are then connected. And what has been recognized for many years is that the brain cells, the brain neurons, in one area of the brain need to be communicating with the neurons in another area in order for us to perceive correctly. So if we want to see people and not just images, two parts of the brain have to be in contact. If we want to see words and not just letters, two parts of the brain have to be in contact. And because success really requires the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere, the artist and the scientist within us to be all active, then they need to be communicating. And the scientists have discovered that what is necessary for that communication is coherence between the different areas of the brain. And the second thing that has been found is the frequency of brain waves that's most important to success is in that alpha area, the 8 to 12 hertz, and even broken down further, there's something called alpha 1, but it's these brain waves of 8 to 12 cycles per second, which are evident there. That's what dominates when we are relaxed and yet alert. And that is the ideal state to, be creative in, for, solutions to come to mind, for creativity and so on.
Right. I mean,
So-
for layman's terms, if you're not relaxed, your brain's in this constant fight and you're never going to find the solution. When you take a breath, relax, that's when you find whatever the solution is you've been looking for.
Yes, it's absolutely correct. There's something known as the aha phenomenon. And that is when somebody has an insight, and what they find is that those insights, creative insights, just things naturally coming to mind that are the right solutions, that is correlated with coherent alpha wave activity. And it's interesting. All of the meditation programs will have different brainwave signatures, different brainwave results. And that is because anything that you do, if you just simply close your eyes without meditating, anything that you do will cause some changes in the mind and some changes in the brain. And that's why people who start almost any meditation program say, oh, yeah, well, that's interesting. It's different. It's different from the normal eyes open waking state. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily beneficial. Just sitting around with your eyes closed and daydreaming is not actually good for the brain. So what you want out of a meditation program is that the brain waves are coherent and that there are these slow alpha waves dominating. And that has only been found in the Transcendental Meditation program. The research shows that mindfulness, for example, results in a different kind of brainwave patterns. Zen Buddhists, all the different meditation programs have their characteristics, but it's not the case that they produce coherence. And Transcendental Meditation, or TM, actually has been shown to produce coherence after about 2 weeks of meditation. It's not something difficult that only is going to be experienced by very long-term meditators. So that's the very surprising research that was done. And it's really why people who start TM find that it's easy to do. It's not difficult to practice TM, and they succeed right away in generating brainwave coherence. So
Now,
that's very important.
Would that lead us into TM in business then? Or is that
Well,
on another section of what you do?
no, years ago, actually, the first book that I wrote, McGraw-Hill published, and the title of the book was TM in Business, and that was about meditators, TM meditators at major corporations in New York City. I was a lawyer at that time and still practice law, but I started TM myself because I had a slip disc in my back and somebody said it would help relax me. And right away, I saw the difference and I took a sabbatical from my law firm and became a TM teacher, studied in France for 3 months and came back. And before going back into the practice of law, I was teaching many business people in New York City, and McGraw-Hill found me, so to speak, and so I wrote that book. And it is the case that, it used to be that meditation was considered something that, was incompatible with an active lifestyle and, with the
Back in the
busy.
80s, I remember anyone that did yoga, meditation, or did anything with crystals or therapeutic healing, anything that wasn't modern medicine was labeled, what was it, a hippie, or, you know, out of the mind or whatever. And now we're seeing it here in the 2000s. Almost everyone has incorporated in some way, even if they're not understanding it, into their lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's definitely the case now that people who are active and who start TM, you know, find that it makes them more productive. Um, the book's website has a number of interviews, video interviews with, you know, well-known people who use TM, you know, on a daily basis. George Stephanopoulos, the ABC anchor, Tom Hanks, Hugh Jackman, Marty Scorsese, uh, you know, Ellen DeGeneres. All of these people practice TM, and they're very practical people.
Mhm.
They do it because it helps them succeed. Ray Dalio, who is, you know, a well-known business person and a philosopher, but he's a billionaire, and he, you know, started one of the major hedge funds that's out there, and investment funds. And Ray Dalio used to say, and still does, that I meditate 20 minutes a day, except when I'm really busy. And then I meditate 40 minutes in the morning. And it's actually 20 minutes twice a day that people do TM. But when he's really busy, he wants that extra burst of energy. So he meditates a little longer. So, and that is, you know, the common experience that people find that they're more energetic, more productive, they get more done in a shorter period of time. They don't have, you know, the same anxieties. There's plenty of research showing that TM overcomes anxiety, depression is either reduced or eliminated, PTSD, heart disease. There's a very interesting study that showed that as a means of prevention, people who were TM meditators had 87% fewer instances of hospital visits or hospitalizations for heart disease and for neurological disorders.
Mhm.
So, and that is the reason why things like blood pressure would be affected, is because the brain is the control center of the body. So we're doing a mental technique, and yet it has this important physiological effect. But transcendental meditation isn't the only thing that creates coherence, obviously. In terms of meditation, it is the most effective at creating coherence. But, you know, the book goes into uh, all of the principal Ayurvedic strategies. Ayurveda is the oldest science of natural medicine. And Ayurveda recognizes that you should eat foods according to your body type, or your mind body type. And there are different mind body types, maybe a half a dozen. There's a questionnaire in the book so you can determine your mind body type. And that will tell you the disorders that are prevalent for that body type, the disorders that you're likely to get, and the foods that you can eat to pacify those disorders.
Mhm.
I can give you one example if you like,
Please,
or
please.
if you, yeah. So there's a type, and many people have this experience as they get older, of Vata, V-A-T-A type. And Vatas are usually thin builds, wiry, and they think fast. They're very quick to learn things, but also a little quick to forget things. That and the disorders that they are prone to are also the disorders that we might associate with that quickness in the mind and body: anxiety, restlessness, some irritability, some depression, uh, insomnia, sleeplessness, and also dry conditions, constipation, for example. So those are typical vata disorders. And Ayurveda prescribes certain foods that are good for vata types to help prevent those disorders before they arise and pacify them if they already exist. In general, the foods for a vata type are heavier foods and warm foods and sweet, sour, and salty foods, actually. And for example, because there's that quickness in the body, there's a principle, and it's a principle in all of medicine, of complementarity, that you do the opposite in the body of what the disorder is. So if, for example, you had heartburn or ulcers, those are inflammatory disorders. That's actually another type that is prone to inflammatory disorders, the pitta type. But you tend to then have foods that have a cooling effect. And modern medicine knows this, at least, when somebody has a well-recognized disease and serious symptoms, they know you don't give spicy foods to somebody who's got peptic ulcers or somebody who's got heartburn. But Ayurveda understands what to do to prevent those disorders and what the characteristics are of all foods, so that Ayurveda would tell you all of the foods to avoid or reduce, and the foods to eat if you have that fiery disposition that has a tendency towards more inflammatory disorders and, outbursts of anger and irritability and short temper. So when that pitta type, that fiery disposition, is in balance, they have very sharp minds. They're very good, creative thinkers. But when they're out of balance, then that fiery disposition leads to anger and outrage and also irritability and inflammatory
You
disorders.
see a lot of things in the health,
Yeah.
and a lot of things can be at least managed by what you eat. We hear this all the time. Change your diet, change how you feel, get away from the junk foods, start eating healthy, but healthy for me may not be healthy for you.
No, that's exactly right. You see a lot of articles in magazines, the 10 healthiest foods on the planet. I mentioned that one in the book. Well, the 10 healthiest foods in the planet are not going to be healthy for everyone because everyone is different. And that's why the Ayurvedic system is necessary, this ancient system that recognizes the differences. Here's the key as a general principle. All of the ancient systems of medicine actually were based on understanding that in nature, there are the 5 basic elements: earth, water, air, space, fire, but also that the body has its counterparts to those 5 elements. We're part of nature, so it makes sense that the human body would also have more or less of those natural elements. And just as, for example, there are places on the earth which are very hot, other places that are dry, places that are wet, and so on, there are physiologies that have more of that fiery quality, more of the dryness in them, more of the air quality in it. Fast-moving vatas have that air element more predominant. So we all have all of the elements, the counterparts to all of the natural elements, but they're more predominant. Some are more predominant in one person, just as those elements in one area of the world are more dominant. In the desert, it's hot and dry. In the rainforest, it's wet and hot. So these elements in nature make different plants thrive more in those elements, or make them, more natural in that different part of the country or different part of the world, just as different foods will be beneficial for us because of our different conditions.
Right.
It-
Like, say, a tomato, very healthy fruit, vegetable, depending on what era you grew up in. um, High in antioxidants, very good for you. I can't have it. It's not good for my system.
Yeah.
Now, my daughter loves tomatoes. She does well with them. Just because it's healthy for one does not mean it's healthy for someone else. And you have to find out what food types you are to work with your body.
Yeah. So tomato is a pitta aggravating food. Tomatoes, cheese, sour foods, spicy foods. A person with that fiery disposition who has a predominance of the pitta element, that person doesn't do well with tomatoes. Tomatoes are also acidic, so it can, be detrimental for people who have certain disorders that are characterized by an excess of acidity and heartburn and so forth. So the key is, because all of us will have all the elements in our body, just some that are predominant, to find out by taking a quiz, for example, or seeing an Ayurvedic physician who has been well trained. And that's even better than taking a quiz. But basically, you want to find out what are the dominant characteristics and then see all the foods that are right. But invariably, it will be the case that we'll eat the wrong foods from time to time, or we won't eat according to the Ayurvedic system of eating your main meal at lunch, when the digestive fire is highest. And instead, people are in the habit of eating too late, going to bed on a full stomach, or eating, too much in the evening. And so what's important then is periodically to rid the body of the toxins and impurities. And there are different cleanses in Ayurveda, and one in particular in the book that's a short 7-day cleanse and a questionnaire to find out if that cleanse is suitable for you. But it's a very rich system, and the book covers the principal aspects of Ayurveda, and it also covers the important notion of sound healing, which you raised in asking really about Hertz. And that's an interesting area too. In Transcendental Meditation, there are really two key components. One is what's called a mantra, which is a sound, means a sound, the effects of which are known. And the other part is the technique of how to use the sound. It's not concentrating on the sound or trying to repeat it over and over or saying it out loud. It's an internal process, but it's a very natural process. And these sounds have the effect of turning the attention inward and allowing the system to settle down. You know that there are sounds that maybe make you want to get up and dance. There are sounds that, actually they play in
Put you to sleep.
yeah, and sounds that when you go into a shopping mall, a store may be playing sounds because they know there are sounds that can get you interested in buying. So sounds can have all different kinds of effects, but these are special sounds that are known to have that effect of producing that inward direction for the mind. And then it's really just a process of allowing that to continue. There are many interviews in the book with people who started all different kinds of techniques, mindfulness, heart math, Zen types of meditation. and then meditations that are just taught on an app, for
Mhm.
example, Breathe and Calm and so forth. And those people I interviewed came to TM after trying these different meditations and said, I liked that technique that I was doing to a certain extent, but it ultimately didn't get rid of my anxiety, didn't settle me down. The a feeling that I had during the practice of meditation didn't carry over. So I wasn't relaxed outside of
Exactly.
meditation,
Yeah.
still getting angry. And then they start TM and they see the difference. And they see the difference not only where it's crucial, when we're not in meditation, you want it to have the carryover effect. So you're relaxed during the day, but they also say that they never experience anything as deep as TM. One woman had been doing mindfulness off and on for 4 years. In her first couple of meditations, she said, mindfulness at times when I did it was good, but it was nothing like this. So, there's a chapter in the book called You're Not a Terrible Meditator. Many people start different meditation programs and they quit. The title to that chapter comes from an NPR radio show that I heard once. If you know the show, What Do You Know, with Marty Feldman. And he was interviewing a New York Times columnist, and they were both saying, they hate meditation. Marty Feldman said, I tried the 1,000 lotus petal meditation, and not one petal opened up for me. I'm a terrible meditator. And so I use that because there are too many people who think meditation is not for them. I'm a terrible meditator, but it's really just the technique. All the techniques are different. And the great thing about TM is it's easy to practice. We've taught the technique to 10-year-olds and to 80-year-olds, and it doesn't matter, and people who are in mental institutions. And the reason easy is important, it's actually not just that it's important in meditation, it's actually necessary in meditation. And that is because if you're doing a concentration technique or a focusing technique, those techniques have you focusing on something, your heartbeat, your breath rate, a candle, or concentrating, trying to repeat a word. But as we know, the mind can only do that for so long.
Mhm.
It's difficult. And it's actually the case that the activity of trying to focus is counterproductive to what you really want in meditation, which is the mind settles down. How can it be settling down in an optimum way if your technique is to keep it active by focusing
Yeah.
on the heart rate or the breath rate? It's a mistake as a result of a technique or techniques invented by, some psychologists in America, who don't understand the tradition of meditation, the ancient tradition, and how the ancient traditions guide us to a meditation that can be successful. So if people are having difficulty in their meditation, they should fix a time, and maybe they already have had enough time to try out that meditation. But if it's not giving you what you want, if you're not really enthusiastic, wildly enthusiastic about your meditation, then I think you should
Change it.
give TM a try.
Yeah.
It's really
Well,
that simple.
we are almost out of time. So where can our viewers and our listeners find you?
So the Coherence Effect is on Amazon, and there are print versions, Kindle versions, or Barnes and Noble. You can go to
Mhm.
any of the major booksellers. We have a website that is www.coherenceeffect.com, but that's going to give you a kind of an overview. You'll be able to see the videos that I mentioned of, well-known people talking about TM. You'll be able to see some of the research. You'll learn a little bit about Ayurveda, but meditation is taught one-to-one. Effective meditation is personal instruction.
You
So
have to have a teacher teach you.
yes,
You can't do it by yourself.
no, you can't do it, and you can't do it from an app. You can't do it from a CD. A book will not teach you. And that is because what's the key in meditation is just you come to the teacher, your innocence, and you follow a few simple instructions, and you have the experience, innocently have the experience of settling down, and then you know how to repeat that experience.
Mhm.
It's a very natural, innocent process. A book can tell you what to do. Do this, do this. An app can tell you, concentrate on this, focus on this, but it's not focusing or concentrating. A book isn't going to know your experience. An app isn't going to know your experience and then give you a few simple instructions to guide you to have that settled experience. So transcendental meditation for years, since it's been taught in the Western world, and for hundreds of years, probably thousands of years before that, it's always taught one-to-one in personal instruction. And after that initial day of instruction, then, you can have an app that can help you understand the principles better. But
Right.
with the
You
initial
need to have
instruction,
the instructor first,
right,
learn how to do it, and then you can do it on your own. But it's
right.
very important to have the instructor first.
And if you want to go right to learn TM, then you can find a teacher at www.tm.org, tm.org. And that will also have lots of information on the research and so forth.
Well,
And,
it's so great to have you today. And
okay,
we will get those websites out to our viewers and our listeners. So they're in the comments section if anyone wants to just click on those. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
thank you, Melissa. Nice to see you.
And have a wonderful day. And for all of our readers and our listeners, happy reading.